All right, it's now my pleasure to bring to you Mr. Benjamin Lawrence and his paper, Heavenly Friendship.
Before I start, as you all know, my name is Benjamin Lawrence. I'm from Maryland, and my title is Heavenly Friendship. And it's the aim of my paper not to bore you to sleep, but if it does, just find a nice place to sit back, fall asleep. Just don't snore too loudly. I might have to come over and shake you. But without further ado, Heavenly Friendship. Friendship provides a union and an intimacy that is so close that it is perhaps even a foretaste of heavenly fellowship. Heavenly friendship is a relationship which resembles heaven in itself in the very multitudinous glory of heaven, where men and women share the love of Christ, they build each other up, and are loyal, faithful, and patient through all hardships. Heavenly friendship never ends. While, earthly speaking, the two friends may part for a time, the friendship they share will always be fulfilled in heaven for all eternity. And above all, heavenly friendships are a mere image of what a relationship in heaven will entail, which is the glory, faith, peace, and love of God. Mankind was not meant to be alone or to live in life with solitude and confinement. So without true friendship, man never receives the communion that is obviously necessary for every life. As Aristotle states, man is by nature a social animal. Thus, mankind was not meant to be alone. It could be said that even the most famous, most entitled men and women who have no true friends are the loneliest people alive. 3 different kinds of friendship are described in Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics: friendships of the utility, friendships of pleasure, and friendships of the good men. Aristotle believes these 3 types of friendships can classify all the many types of friends a man will have in his lifetime. He understands that only 3 types of friendship exists in the friendship of the good man is the finest and rarest friendship any man and woman can have. Friendship is also heavily mentioned in the Bible, where God speaks through numerous proverbs and lessons to describe heavenly friendship and the union. Using words of thoughts of Aristotle's and the wisdom of God, this paper will reveal the truths that God has shared with his chosen people, so they might be inclined to ponder and discover heavenly friendship. The first topic of discussion is the friendship of utility. Friendships of utility are the first 2 kinds of friendships which can be called dependent friendships, because the friendships are dependent on what the other provides. Friendships of utility are not permanent, but always changing. Thus, if the usefulness is done away with, these people will no longer be friends because the usefulness that has been offered will be dissolved. Moreover, this kind of friendship seems to exist chiefly between old people. For at that age, people pursue not only the pleasant, but the useful. This friendship is then founded upon utility that each provides. For example, an elderly man asked a young boy who was 15 years old if he could mow his yard and trim his bushes in return for $40. The young boy worked for this same elderly man for many years, mowing and trimming and earning money. Now, the friendship formed between the elderly man and the boy is based upon utility. The elderly man pays the young boy to mow and trim his yard. In return, the boy receives $40. Now, after 6 years, the boy, who has now grown into manhood, decides to move away and start a family, thus ending the friendship of utility that the two had obtained. Thus, when the motive of the friendship is done away with, the friendship is dissolved. Therefore, friendships of utility are never permanent nor stable, since the durability of this type of friendship is founded upon the utility each finds. For they are pleasant to each other insofar as they rouse each other hopes of something good to come. Take away the usefulness, and the friendship of utility no longer stands on its own. Obviously, friendship of utility lacks permanency. The heavenly friendship would have, as they are the fellowship of the beloved in heaven for all eternity. Understanding now that a friendship of utility is never permanent, and that the usefulness is taken away, the friendship dissolves, a question arises. The question begs to be answered: are friendships of utility something which should be avoided or sought after? Naturally, there needs to be friendships whose sole purpose is to aid and provide usefulness to others. The elderly, for example, will always need people to provide assistance for them. All men and women suffer with the sin of selfishness and desire their needs above others. Furthermore, nearly all friendships of utility are self-centered. Therefore, those who love for the sake of utility love for the sake of what is good for themselves. So when 2 people create friendships based on utility, they both want something out of the friendship that the other provides. So while providing needs and uses to other people is right and proper, their friendship is at constant risk of being dissolved. So mankind should not lean completely on the friendships on those friendships for their support, because when the usefulness ends, so does the friendship. However, that does not seem always to be true. Friends that in the past have provided use for each other will still be friends for a very long time because they have provided great needs for each other. And those friendships will always be met with an end with gratitude and thanksgiving. So while friends of utility may not be one's best friends, they should be sought after and found, because in the end, no one will ever regret making friends, even for the sake of utility. While friendships of utility are still based upon use, a man may make this type of friendship a good one by remembering gratitude and appreciation for the other person. Lastly, friendships of utility will still always be met with an ending. Not necessarily an ending of the friendship, but merely the ending of utility. When the end of an education has arrived, and the students finish their schooling, they will graduate, shake the hand of their teacher, thanking him for the many years of service, teaching, and wisdom he gave them. And the young will move on into the world, though have never forgotten. These endings are bittersweet, and for the friendships that have been made over the many years, will be met with tears of sadness because the end has come. These friendships do not need to end forever, though. The friendships between the teacher and student could change and take on a new form rather than that of utility. However, when the end has come, these friendships will become less active and make their home in the past of their lives as memories and moments a person will never forget. Those friendships of utility will last a lifetime and prove to be a monumental step into the future. Yes, friendships of utility do not need to last as long as lasting friendships. However, friendships of utility should not be frowned upon nor degraded, for the seed of friendship will never die. Because while the ending of utilitarian friendship has come, many doors will open in which to have the same friendship grow into something new. Furthermore, distance between great friends never degenerates or grows the friendship, yet hibernates until the friends meet again. While the utility of the friendship may cease to live, gratitude can be one characteristic which will never end. The friendships of man's association, utilitarian as they may be, are still very hard to give up, because he cannot keep each of those friendships. However, the gratitude in man's heart that lives forever is the vestigial afterglow of close relationship. Friendships of utility depend on the usefulness one provides another. On the other hand, friendships of the young seem to aim at pleasure. Do young people who have friendships seem to aim at pleasure? The goal of friendship at young age seems to strive for acceptance and happiness. For the young people, their emotions are dependent on the happiness and can also change very quickly, for they live under the guidance of emotion. A young person's feeling can switch and turn 180 degrees depending on the situation that is at hand. For that is what can be said separates the young from the old. Old people have feelings and emotions that compare to pond water, which stay steady and calm, while the young compare to winding rivers, which are always moving and never staying in one place for very long. The young, like rivers, also have a great capability to carve new paths and change the trajectory. The young seem to pursue all that is pleasant to themselves. Now, this behavior is not said to be wrong, because the young are acting as the young should act. One of the greatest benefits of being young is having to learn, having to be taught, having to fail and get up again. The young will never cease to have emotions, jumping emotions, if they never have emotions to jump. And to be good at something, you have to be bad at it first. So no one should condemn the young because they act in such a manner. It is true that friends that they have when they are young seem to be here one day and gone the next. This is why they quickly become friends and quickly cease to be so. The friendships the young enjoy the most are the friendships which make them feel most pleasant. Friendships of the youth depend upon the feelings of enjoyment. A child will not want a friend who makes him feel bad or does not make him happy. Therefore, while it is not wrong, the young tend to have friendships that aim at pleasure. Since the young chase friendships of pleasure, a question arises. Do some friendships which seek pleasure in the end become inherently evil? A man's friends are his greatest influencers. And if a man finds pleasure in his friends, this man should know whether the pleasure he finds is right or wrong. And go a step further and assert that no bad pleasure exists whatsoever. Instead, all pleasure is good, because pleasure is anything that makes anyone happy. If the assumption is that no bad pleasure exists, then how can some friendships cause ill actions upon each other? All good friends suffer at times from various actions. Friends may fight with each other, they may sin against each other, they may cause harm to the pleasure shared between the two. However, suffering does not mean they are bad. Though suffering can be a sign of a problem that can need to be fixed, or one where the end is more and more hardship. When hardships occur, most friendships that are solely based on pleasure die quickly, which is why friendships of pleasure may be here one day and gone the next. The presentation of adversity can happen in two ways. A person can lose interest in the pleasure, or consider it sinful. But since all pleasure is right, the second option cannot exist. However, since each person can clearly understand that there is right and wrong, there must be a right and wrong pleasure as well. So the assertion that no bad pleasure exists is false. But man does still not know what pleasures are the right or wrong kind. Fortunately, the book of Proverbs, written by the wisest man ever to live, has numerous verses dealing with the differences between good and bad pleasure. Christians especially ought to desire to understand what a friendship that is heading for hardship looks like. If there is wisdom and morality, there clearly must be a correct way to have pleasure within friendships. God created friendships and relationships, and He clearly desires friendships to produce pleasure that brings glory to Him. Friendships, heavenly friendships, seek not only the will of God, but pursue His wisdom and knowledge. Thus, in the possession of pleasure, heavenly friendship must be founded and welded to the foundation of God's wisdom. Friendships of pleasure consist upon the enjoyment one person obtains from another, yet there still exists pleasure which is not included within heavenly friendship. Thus, the discussion must continue to further describe heavenly friendship. Firstly, if a friendship is based upon good pleasure, how can these friendships cease to exist? With age comes maturity, at least for most people. When the young grow up, the pleasures which were previously enticing to them are no longer, because with increasing age, their pleasures become different. So friendships that the young may have commonly cease to exist when the young grow older. Now this is just the way of life, and this only happens in time, and most common among the youth, because it is in the youth which people learn to mature and begin to mold into the men and women God ordained. Lastly, while the young bounce from one pleasure to the next, going from one friendship to the next, they are not to be degraded for their actions, because with age comes maturity. Friendships of pleasure are to be tested with wisdom, but after that, they are to be enjoyed and cherished for as long as they last, because after the young have grown up, they will not have as many opportunities to chase friendships of pleasure. While friendships of pleasure, again, are temporary, there is still a truly good pleasure, which people form an association around the attaining of those pleasures, such as music, physical activity, close relationships, which are indeed wonderful pleasures, and they ought to be enjoyed because God has given people such pleasures to enjoy. In heaven, there will be such pleasures, yet the greatest pleasure will be with the family of God, when each man and woman gather around the throne of God to extol, praise, and share in the communion with the Father. With friendships of utility and pleasure interpreted, Aristotle names one final friendship he believes to be the highest, most rare, and in his opinion, the best friendship a human can have, the friendship of the good. Aristotle believes that the perfect friendship is the friendship of men who are good and alike in virtue. Aristotle believes that the perfect friendship occur between people who are good for each other and good for themselves. Basically, Aristotle states that the only perfect friendships are between people who are perfect. However, Aristotle does state that their friendship lasts as long as they are good. Again, the perfect friends are made up of individuals who are perfect. And if the individual ceases to be good, the friendship is no longer perfect. Aristotle continues further, asserting that their goodness to each other only happens by their character, for they do this by reason of their nature and not incidentally. So, in Aristotle's ideal friendship, there is no room for mistake or luck. Such friendships are so rare because the individuals are so rare. Furthermore, such relationship requires time and familiarity. As the proverb says, man cannot know each other until they have eaten salt together. Clearly, such friendships still have to suffer the kind of hardships knowing each other brings and knowing knowledge brings. What separates this type of friendship from another is that the individuals are perfect, not by chance, but by character. Not all these friendships have been fully engaged. The time has come to open the Bible and compare these friendships to the wisdom of God. Christians should be building and founding everything they do upon the Word of God. And this, of course, includes the relationships and friendships Christians have with each other. Many parts of the Bible speak of friendships and what heavenly friendship should look like, which is very useful for Christians because while God does not specifically spell out each attribute of heavenly friendship, he does give man wisdom, stories, illustrations to convey each attribute of heavenly friendship. He does not. So while mankind will still fall short, a person can never perfectly uphold a perfect friendship because all mankind is fallen by nature. So while mankind will still fall short and sin against his neighbor, one of the greatest aspects of friendship is forgiveness, which was not mentioned in the thoughts of Aristotle. The greatest friendship is one that is founded upon godly love for each other, and with love comes forgiveness. And a long-lasting friendship would not exist without godly love and forgiveness. When a friendship is founded upon godly love for each other, the friendship brings glory to God. Friendships and togetherness was introduced from the beginning of time when God created Adam and then created Eve because man was not meant to be alone. Then the Lord God said, "It is not good that man should be alone. I will make a helper fit for him." Friendship is the most sought after relationship a man can have with another. For a person will have many friends, but only one wife or husband. Since humans were not meant to be alone, but to have friendships, there needs to be guidance on how heavenly friendships are meant to be. So naturally, when a man wants to figure a question out, he ought to go into the Word, find the passage, read it, and apply it into his daily life. And there are several such passages in the Bible which describe friendship in all the wise and glorifying to God. Firstly, a friend loves at all times, and a brother is born for adversity. Talking about love in terms of friendship can oftentimes be awkward or underestimated, but this proverb is not talking about grits love. Grits love, like the type of cornstarch food, is a type of love that is easily made and likewise easily dissipated. This type of brotherly love is consistent, steadfast, Jesus-reflecting love. A friend will love at all times, times that are not only easy, but also downright miserable. This type of love needed for godly friendship is the one that is willing to make the ultimate sacrifice. Greater love has no other than this, that someone laid down his life for his friends. Therefore, in heavenly friendship, the two will love each other at all times, despite the adversity that will naturally arise in all sorts of situations in life. Secondly, since a friend loves at all times, a friend will also stick close to his friend and is faithful though he may wound his friend. The thought that a heavenly friendship would not include faithfulness and closeness is ludicrous. While each Christian cannot know what heaven will be full of, Christians can be sure of the Word of God and what is said by him. A man of many companions may come to ruin, but there is a friend who sticks closer than a brother. A man of many companions who may be there in times of joy and celebration to join in with the singing and drinking of wine. However, when time comes that the man truly needs help and is lost, he who may have many companions may come to ruin. Now, of course, there is no guarantee that a man who has many companions may come to ruin, because Solomon once says may come to ruin. Furthermore, when adversity does arrive, which in each life, Christian life, will happen, the friend who cares the most and sticks close will be closer to the friend than his own brother. This means that no matter the outcome, a heavenly friend will stick closer to him than his own flesh and blood. This is not meant to cast judgment on one's brothers and sisters. The illustration is to show how deep a friendship of this capacity can become. That being a friend to someone and sticking close, though through each and every hardship, this friend will be considered closer than one's own brother. In closing, heavenly friendship is the closest foretaste of heaven man and woman could experience. Now more than ever, young men and women need friends, and desperately need heavenly friendships. When all other earthly objects will fail humanity, God and friends will never fail nor abandon. For God gave man friends, and likewise himself to humanity. In all this discussion, there has been talk of utilitarian friendships, friendships of pleasure, and no doubt the friendship of the good man. Each of these friendships, Aristotle describes, are indeed very wisely thought through and through. Yet, in all the gloriousness of his thought, he lacks the glue which holds these together. Each three types of friendships are essentially useless without God and his Spirit. Heavenly friendships are useful, pleasurable, and a foretaste of heaven, where everything in heaven is perfect. Yet without God, the friendships will not stand on its own. Man does not make a good friendship. He simply cannot. However, when God enters into all aspects of man's life, including his friendships, a new friendship emerges. One that forgives, loves, holds, pursues, carries, and never abandons. But the most important, crucial, and critical characteristic of heavenly friendship is godly love. Without love, nothing in a friendship will stand. Love covers a multitude of sins. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never ends. Heavenly friendship needs to be the second most important role in the Christian life, with the first being to seek God. All earthly things will leave man at death. His heavenly friendship will follow him into eternity with God, where the fellowship he once started will be continued on for all time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lawrence. Let's go ahead and begin with some clarifying questions on the terms that you use. You developed the concept of heavenly friendship, and that seems to be similar to, but in contrast, the Aristotelian concept of the friendship of good men. Could you explain just briefly how those are similar and how they differ?
Yeah. I never liked how Aristotle described the perfect friendship at all. It was a joke to me. And so the reason I wanted to talk about the heavenly friendship and compare it a little bit is because Aristotle completely believes that the perfect friendship only occurs between people that are perfect, and as Christians we know that no one is perfect, so it is completely ludicrous in all means. But heavenly friendship, while we can't have a perfect friendships will only exist in heaven, there is an aspect where you can still strive, while knowing, of course, you can never be perfect, to strive after what a heavenly friendship will entail. And everything that you want to learn about heavenly friendships is dictated in the Bible. And what I liked about just three types of friendship that Aristotle had is that they are all included in heavenly friendship. But, of course, Aristotle wasn't a Christian, and so he lacked the key aspects of everything that kind of put it together. And so comparing them is pretty easy, because all Christians are useful for each other. Like when you are best friends, you are very useful to each other. You find pleasure in that, and you consider that friendship to be just the best friendship, right? You have best friends, right? Everyone has at least one best friend, or maybe several. But in that sense, but the cornerstone, you could say, is Jesus. It's God, and that sounds really rehearsed, but it is true. Without God, your friendship just won't ever be complete, and clearly it won't ever be continued, because when time comes, those friendships will end for a time, but they will be continued on for all of eternity, and eternity is a long time. And so, while perfect friendship in Aristotle it's dry throat. There's no life in what his friendships are. It seems like you're tipping toe around everything, making sure you're always perfect to your friend all the time. And those who have like best friends, that's just not possible all the time. So yeah, that's what I would say.
Okay, so you seem to be distancing yourself, at least in the concept of heavenly friendship, from Aristotle's concept of friendship. And of course, the main characteristic Aristotle gives of his perfect friendship is a sort of respect for the other person's character. That, it doesn't say that people are perfect, but there seems to be a necessity of a respect for their character, that, it says it's of men that are of good character, their friendship for one another. And, is it really possible to have friendship without that sort of, not perfect respect, but at least a sort of a sense that I admire this person, this is a good person. Would you say that when you have someone that you really see that they are a pretty deeply flawed individual, that you can still have a very deep type of friendship with that person?
No, I completely agree. I think that's even a closer idea of heavenly friendship. And what I mean by that is, you all know the hymn, the hymn that Jesus is a friend for sinners. I was thinking about putting that in my paper, I just didn't have room. But that God's friendship, or Jesus' friendship with us, it's kind of weird to call it a friendship, but it is indeed still a friendship. His friendship is just like that, right? We are extraordinarily flawed, stained, but cleansed by him. And so when you get to know an individual and you see the flaws, it shouldn't surprise you, of course, because, of course, you yourself are flawed as well. But it even makes the friendship even deeper, because you can look at that person and say, it sounds kind of weird, yeah, you're sinful, but I completely respect and I still like you anyways, and I love you anyways, right? Even though you may have done such and such to my friend, or you may have done such and such to me, you can still be able to look back and forgive, which is why I absolutely, I like that with all of Aristotle's friendships that he described, 3 of them, neither of them included something called forgiveness. It just didn't, and forgiveness is a huge thing in friendship, is asking for forgiveness and telling your friend, hey, I sinned against you, would you please forgive me? And the friend will forgive you, and there is a closer bond that will touch deeper than when a friend will not forgive you, or you just don't share that intimacy. So I would definitely say it's even closer aspect is when you know the person's flaws, you know them inside and out, but yet you still love them and you still forgive them in every way.
Okay. Aristotle seemed to give a pretty limited notion of how many perfect friends you could have. He seems like really only 2 or 3. And those seem to arise from some limiting factors. First, you had to basically be living with somebody to know them well enough to really say, yes, I understand this person's character. And they have to be a person of sufficiently good character where you can say, yes, I think this is a good person. And Aristotle says those type of people are rare. Your concept of heavenly friendship seems to kind of be much more wide open. And so I just kind of imagine this conversation between 2 Christians and whether or not you think there's a plausible interchange. 2 people know each other, they're both Christians, and they both, have a general admiration for the other's character. But if you ask one of them, is this person your friend? No, he's not my friend. Is that plausible, or would you kind of be more inclined to say, well, all Christians are friends?
That's a good question. Of course, it's hard to answer that kind of question and generalize all Christians in saying, oh, all Christians may not all be friends, or they may all be friends. And it's like, I'm definitely not friends with that guy over there, even though he's a Christian. I disagree with everything on him. I don't want to hang around him. It's just a tricky place to tiptoe around, because, of course, all Christians should love each other, because if you are truly a Christian, you are brothers and sisters in Christ. And while you may not get along with your brothers and sisters at home, family-wise, you still have a love for them. It may not be the same kind of love you have for others, but
Well, one of the other characteristics Aristotle said about friendship is that friends possess towards each other goodwill, meaning I wish you well. Now, it's pretty easy to say that, well, I should have goodwill towards all Christians. I wish them well. But is friendship something different from just saying, they're a Christian, I wish them well, Is friendship something that is a different quantity that, if you say, yeah, they're a Christian, I wish them well, but that's not my friend. Maybe someday they would be, but no, I wouldn't call them my friend. And we seem to be very uncomfortable saying that. Is there something wrong about trying to think of everyone as our friend, or is there something wrong about saying, well, these are my friends, and I wish other people well, but that's not my friend.
Yeah. I honestly don't think I'm in a place to say whether it's wrong or right, but I will say that I have many friends that are Christians, good best friends, and I have other people that are Christians. I don't consider them friends. I still, if they are in times of need and they need help, I will genuinely lend a hand and do anything I can. But it's just, you have to describe that kind of intimacy, right? Heavenly friendship is one that is extraordinarily intimate. And so if you don't really share that intimacy, I'm not saying you can never share that intimacy, and I'm sure that you could if you wanted to. But on definition terms, I'd say there are some Christians that you may not consider friends. And that's not a bad thing either, because I may not know John down the street who's a Christian, but if I hear, oh, John down the street is a Christian, he's your friend, I don't know him, I would say, no, he's not my friend. And I'm not doing any harm to him or me, because I simply don't know him. I may say, oh, does John need help? He's inside, he has surgery, he needs to mow a lawn. I'll be like, I'll mow his lawn. I don't know him, but that's fine, I'll do that. And that may cultivate a relationship, but I can't say that, oh, you guys are all my friends. Everyone is my friend. No. And I don't think that should be taken as an offense, like, oh my goodness, you're not my friend? It's like, no, I don't know you. And I'm not saying I can't get to know you.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, I was also thinking about that verse that a man of many companions is brought to grief. And oftentimes the term acquaintance has been used as, we've been introduced, we are acquaintances. Are you friends? Well, no, something like that. All right, thank you very much. Other questions?
So you mentioned something about how the friendship of pleasure, or it was a friendship of utility or pleasure, I forget which one, was if you can move apart for a period, but then you can come back and the friendship is where you left it off. How does that affect the heavenly friendship? Say, since heavenly friendship isn't the same thing as the other two, if you had a heavenly friend, but then you had to move apart for a while, what if you moved to another state or something, and you came back for that, is that still a heavenly friendship, or does that become less of a friendship?
I would say it would stay the same, because it wouldn't, of course, be as lively as it once was, but I would consider, if you have a best friend who moves away, you may lose contact with him for a while, and let's just bring it a bit further and say death, okay? Death is the ultimate separation between best friends. When you get to heaven, you're like, who are you again? It's gonna be like a hibernation almost. You're still gonna be like, oh, remember that time when we went camping at the lake and you fell in the river and then you pulled me in afterwards and then we're swimming in the river, and you still have those memories. The memories don't go anywhere. Those times of happiness and pleasure won't go anywhere. It may not be as up to date, but that's what getting back together and being close would do.
So what if it wasn't more like a separation that you can't help, like someone died or someone had to move away, but more like a separation because someone did something that hurt the other person, and then you have to take some time to sort of heal between that? Where are you still heavenly friends, or are you not friends for that period?
Yeah, it's a very tricky thing to once be friends and then go back to the person and say, I'm sorry, you're not my friend anymore. That's a very hard thing to say, so it's a hard question to answer in the sense that if I wronged my friend deeply, I know personally my best friend, he would forgive me. It may take time, but he would forgive me and that relationship would be restored. And because you have to keep asking yourself that question, what is heavenly friendship? It's the one that forgives and emulates the relationship between man and God. So do we wrong God all the time? Of course. But it's it's hard to, it's very tricky to say it's up to you to keep up the heavenly friendship, because of course it's not up to you. It's up to God. God will grant peace and restoration in between if there had been that kind of altercation, confrontation, you know. And so it's sort of like if, let's say, your best friend wronged you, and she was like, and then you were like, I need some time to stay away. God will fulfill that relationship if it's still meant to be the way it was. Levi.
So I was thinking about your classification of friendship, and I know that the problem you had with Aristotle's perfect friendship is that we can never be perfect, so it's just absurd to think that, but that we can, look forward to something like that, and the best we can do is sort of try and replicate that perfect friendship. And I was wondering how it's totally different from your first type, which is utilitarian friendship, where it's wrong in that or it's not perfect in that we desire something from the other person. And I was thinking, is desiring something from another person and, just being in a utilitarian friendship, does that make it wrong, or is it just not right enough to be considered perfect? Like, is there anything inherently wrong with the utilitarian friendship?
No, nothing wrong with utilitarian friendship. Of course, the world is fallen, so there can be times where utility is a bad thing, that you're trying to take someone for granted and take many uses for them. So of course it can be wrong, but in the sense of just general utilitarian friendships, is not wrong at all. I think those, out of all the friendships that Aristotle stated, utilitarian is my favorite, because it is the one that can be morphed into all the other three types of friendships. And my part about teacher to student, I like that because of obviously I'm graduating, and I was thinking of Mr. H at the same time, and I'm thinking of him because he's had to say goodbye to his GPT-5 students many times, and that relationship changes. He's not completely up to date with them, he's not meeting with them weekly to do classes, but while that friendship may have ended, it's not an end of the utilitarian, right? So, and that story about the boy with the lawn trimming his bushes, that's me. I mow for a guy, and I used to do that. But I'm gonna move away now, and I'm not saying that I will never come back and be like, oh, Mr. Walker, I don't know you anymore. Our relationship's over. It may just be a different type of friendship. It morphed into something different.
So is what separates a utilitarian friendship and a perfect friendship just the people not being perfect, or is there some other component that it's missing? Like, do you have to be more intimate with them? Like, for example, being together for the sake of not, wanting something from them? Or essentially, if the people in the utilitarian friendship happen to be perfect, would that be a perfect friendship, or would there need to be something else?
Again, it can't be perfect, but I was gonna really spend most of my time on the utilitarian part, but I couldn't do that. But I was gonna state that utilitarian can be a very good means of having a good relationship, and I was gonna talk about servant-hearted, giving, where you give without receiving, and I was trying to talk about, is that still utilitarian even though you're not getting anything in return? Because that's how Aristotle describes it. Two people get one thing from each other. Utilitarian is just, it's a very complicated and amazing friendship you can have, because giving and being useful for each other is just a great thing. You just providing usefulness and willing to help people is a beautiful thing, especially in the Christian circles, of being able to help someone who's in need without saying, well, I'll mow your lawn, or I know you're sick, but I want you to come back when you're healthy, and I want you to mow my lawn for a few months. It's the don't worry about it. I'm gonna help you out. You can just sit back, and I'll take care of your house. Don't worry about it. Or I'll watch after your children while you're gone. Don't worry about it. There is that care, and that's why it can turn into almost a heavenly friendship in itself. Because usefulness, you can also find when you love to work, you find pleasure in being useful to each other. So there's that pleasure aspect in the utilitarian aspect. And when you have pleasure and utility and you love doing it and you get close to the person, because when you work with someone well, you get to know them well, you get to know their quirks, what they do, how they respond to hardships, and you get to know the person, because hardships are honestly one of the best ways you get to know the person. How do they deal under stressful conditions? How do they deal when they've lost a loved one? How do they, you get to know that person even deeper. And so that's why it's my favorite, and yes, I think it can be cultivated to all the other different relationships and friendships, including heavenly friendship. Yeah.
First off, lovely picture. I wanted to know your opinion. Is there a point where a good friendship can stop being a good friendship?
Cool.
What does that take?
It honestly takes, friendships and relationships take effort. They do. I was listening to an old pastor talking about time and how he goes around and he's always surprised in how everyone is saying, I have no time to do anything. And he's like, well, no one's prioritizing things correctly. And of course he was like, the first thing you have to do is God is your center of your focus. The second after that, it's your relationships. Relationships take effort. So if you may have a good relationship now, you can stop putting effort into it, right? When a hardship comes, you can just go, okay, I mean, I'll just let you go. And bada boom, there it goes. It's out the window. In the past, I mean, you may still know the person, you may still have a good time talking with them when you come back, but the effort is gone. So of course, a good friendship, or even like best friends that you've had when you were young may not be as close as they were now when you're 40 or 50. You may have different best friends. And that's not a bad thing. You shouldn't be like, I need to go back and tell my old friend when I was in high school and get back and being best friends with them. You can. It takes effort though.
Yeah, I guess in those cases, would those friendships that dissolve be short friendships of pleasure? Or could a perfect friendship, as Aristotle puts it, ever become something like that where it simply dissolves? Is that possible?
It is possible. I was blessed to have friends for a very long time. Ever since I was very little, and the same friends I've had now, and I truly believe that I'll have different friends for the rest of my life. So I'm blessed in that aspect, but I also know many people who have had so many different friends that have gone away. And that's not a bad thing, and it's sad. Leaving here at GBT5, it's going to be sad saying goodbye to everyone, and we've been together for 5 years, right? That's not a short time, but it is going to go away. I may run into you sometime like, oh, Anna, it's been a long time, how you doing? And so we could consider like schooling a utilitarian relationship because you guys are working together, but after utilitarian is gone, it turns into something different. And it's now, I don't want to say it's up to you because it really isn't. But you have to give the effort almost to say, I mean, you can pray about it and say, Lord, I want to continue this relationship, make it possible, right? And He'll bless that, and you'll find time to get together and keep that relationship going, having long conversations, getting to know the person deeper and deeper and deeper, and it will last. And of course, you'll be in heaven together, and it will last even longer.
So you seem to take issue with perfect friendship as Aristotle describes it, and I'm wondering how you reconcile that with Christ's command to be perfect as Heavenly Father is perfect. Obviously, it's not something that we can live up to this side of heaven, but isn't it? But I don't see how it would be wrong to have perfection as a goal if that's what we're commanded to do. If this is like the model, and we can just try to live as close to that as we possibly can. Like, how would you reconcile that?
You're right. God does command us to love one another and to cultivate perfectness, perfect holiness, perfect righteousness. But we can't, right? So what did He give us in return to kind of bypass that imperfection, right? He gave us, for the relationship between God, He gave us faith. The relationship between others, He gave us forgiveness. And so while we're imitating God in His perfectness, part of imitating God in His perfectness is forgiving. And so you may have a good while before you have a fight with your friend, but it will happen. You may fight with your spouse one day, and it will happen. But the way you get around that, while still trying to emulate the perfect marriage, the perfect friendship, the perfect, you put a label on it, it's forgiveness in that sense. Forgiveness and love. While we still won't be perfect at it forever, it's still something you strive after, and you keep learning. You keep having to go back to the Word and go, this is what I should have done when fighting, or now I'm going to go back and I'm going to ask for forgiveness, or I'm going to, even though this person wronged me terribly, I'm going to forgive him because that's what Christ did for me. And that's where you get that image, right? It's not like a hard copy. It's just an image of the relationship between God and Christ, and that's what you could say He expects us to do, is to be image bearers of Christ, right? To carry the light.
Alright, so what you're saying is that the importance of forgiveness is the main thing that separates Aristotle's perfect friendship from your idea of heavenly friendship?
Yep, absolutely, 100%.
Alright, thank you.
Would you say that there could be a utilitarian friendship because a person is lonely? Say I'm lonely and I wish to be friends with you. Could that be considered a utilitarian friendship?
Yeah, if you're trying to provide use for each other, it's a good question. Is that you try to? I mean, I'm not sure if you guys are thinking about my paper when you guys are thinking like, oh, Joe right there, he's a utilitarian friend because all we do is we just play soccer together. That's all we do. So yeah, I mean, if you're sad and lonely, and I'm the person who comes over and I play you music and calm me down, or I play games with you, you consider that a utilitarian friendship. But of course, that'll probably spark to something new. Spending so much time with you, getting to know you, is going to turn into more of a consider like the heavenly friendship where we're sharing community with God each other. That.
So if you have a friendship and it kind of is wounded in a sense, is it good to mend it right away or to wait a little bit?
I would say it's kind of not up to you. It's a weird thing. I've had a lot of bickers with my best friends, and I try to like mend it right away and fix it and do whatever I can. And the friend is just still like, I still don't feel it. I'm sorry. It's still not mended back together. And I'm like, oh, I'm trying to do all the things and try to make myself look better in your eyes. It doesn't work that way. God has to bless that part. There'll be times, and you'll know it. When it happens, after a time of break apart or something like that, you'll feel it when God is mending it back together, and it is a glorious feeling, indeed. So, mending it back together quickly. Of course, you want to forgive quickly, right? You want to ask for forgiveness. The person may not accept it, or he may accept it. It just may not be perfect yet, but it will. God is the one who felicitates that mending.
So you mentioned that nearly all friendships of utility are self-centered, but then towards the bottom of the paragraph, you say they should still be pursued and that they can be a very good thing. So I was wondering if there are any examples you can think of where they're not self-centered, where they actually are for the other's benefit and it's not all about you.
Yeah.
And how that could.
Yeah, I felt kind of like bad just writing about how most utilitarian friendships are all like self-centered, and at the heart, most of them are, and it's not a terribly bad thing. There's bad self-centeredness and selfishness, and there's sometimes it's just like this is what I deserve. I mowed your lawn. I'm gonna get $4, and sometimes he didn't pay me, and that's okay. I mean, I don't feel terrible about that, but there are, to your question, what are some utilitarian friendships where being selfish and self-centered is not a key factor? I would say, just trying to think of characteristics of me that I could shed a light on, is, I guess I would say it all depends on how deep the friendship of utility becomes. Where if I just met you and you were at the grocery store and I said, oh, I'm sorry, Billy, I don't have my wallet with me, right? You don't know me, you'd be like, well, I'm sorry, then you can't take home your groceries. You're gonna have to come back and get them later, and we can't tell you that we're gonna keep them for you, and you're like, ah. But let's say I've been going to your grocery store for 10 years, and you're the same cashier checks me out every time. I'm like, oh, Lily, I forgot my wallet. And you're like, it's fine. I know you'll pay it back. You just come back in here tomorrow, pay me back. It'll be fine. I trust you. That could be an image. Even I mean, there are lines, of course, in utilitarian friendships because you're trying to make money, but there are times where you're just like, it's okay. I don't need it this time. Don't worry about it. And you can let it go, and it's fine. And then it even goes further to say that, like, you start to have more of a close bond. That person actually trusts me. He wants to, he doesn't just care about himself or what he gets out of it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lawrence.